Good day, everyone. I am Jehannah Marie L. Palalon, and today I will be presenting about learning theories in practice, which is part of Unit 2, Practical Foundations of Teaching. In this presentation, we will discuss three important learning theories: behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. We will also look at how these theories can be applied in actual classroom situations and how they can help teachers understand the way students learn. For our objectives, first we aim to explain the basic concepts and key principles of behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism, including their main focus and how they can be applied in teaching. Second, we aim to create a simple learning activity by applying a principle from one of these learning theories within a structured teaching process. And lastly, we aim to appreciate the importance of learning theories in guiding effective teaching and supporting student learning. These objectives will guide us throughout our discussion. Before we proceed, let us think about this question. Is learning simply a change in observable behavior, or is it something that happens entirely inside the human mind? And how can a teacher tell if true learning has actually taken place? This question is important because learning can be viewed in different ways. Sometimes we can observe learning through changes in a student's behavior. However, learning can also involve processes that we cannot directly see, such as thinking, remembering, understanding, and making connections. This is where learning theories become important because they provide different perspectives on how learning happens. So, what are learning theories? Learning theories are frameworks that explain how people acquire, process, retain, and apply knowledge and skills. They help teachers understand the learning process and make better decisions about instructional strategies, activities, feedback, and assessment. For this presentation, we will focus on three important perspectives: behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism. Behaviorism focuses on observable behavior under enforcement, while cognitivism focuses on mental processes such as memory, attention, and problem solving, and constructivism views learning as an active and social process in which learners build knowledge through experiences and interactions. Let us now discuss each theory and its major theorists. First is behaviorism, associated with B.F. Skinner, who lived from 1904 to 1990. Behaviorism focuses mainly on observable and measurable behavior. It explains learning in terms of how our environment and the consequences of our actions influence our behavior. One of Skinner's most important contributions was operant conditioning. Operant conditioning means that behavior can be strengthened or weakened depending on what happens after the behavior. For example, if a student studies hard and receives praise or a good grade, the student may become more likely to study hard again. This leads us to one of the important principles of behaviorism, which is positive reinforcement. Positive reinforcement means giving something desirable after a behavior in order to increase that behavior. For example, a teacher might give a student a reward or praise after the student completes an assignment on time. Because the student receives something positive, they may be encouraged to repeat the behavior. Another principle is negative reinforcement. Negative reinforcement means removing something unpleasant to encourage a desired behavior. It is important to remember that negative reinforcement is not the same as punishment. In negative reinforcement, something unpleasant is removed to increase a behavior. Another principle is shaping. Shaping means teaching a complex behavior by reinforcing smaller steps or approximations toward the desired behavior. For example, imagine a student who is afraid of speaking in front of the class. Instead of immediately asking the students to give a full presentation, the teacher can begin with smaller steps. First, the student may be asked to read one sentence from their seat. Next, they may read in front of a friend. Later, they can speak at the front of the classroom. Finally, they can present to the entire class. So each small improvement is encouraged until the student develops the complete skill. Another principle is extinction. This happens when a behavior gradually decreases because it is no longer reinforced. So how can teachers apply behaviorism in the classroom? One example is through a token economy. A teacher can give students behavior credits or points when they demonstrate positive behaviors, such as arriving on time, participating appropriately, or completing their work. These points can later be exchanged for a reward. Another application is immediate feedback and skill drills. For example, during vocabulary practice, if a student mispronounces a word, the teacher can immediately provide the correct pronunciation and ask the student to repeat it. This allows students to correct their mistakes while practicing the skill. Overall, behaviorism is particularly useful when teachers want to develop specific behaviors, routines, habits, and skills through practice, feedback, and reinforcement. The second theory is cognitivism, which we will discuss through the work of Jean Piaget, who lived from 1896 to 1980. Unlike behaviorism, which focuses on observable behavior, cognitivism focuses on what happens inside the learner's mind. It examines processes such as attention, memory, thinking, reasoning, problem solving, and information processing. Piaget believed that children are active learners who construct a mental structures called schemas. A schema is a mental framework that helps us organize and understand information. For example, a young child may have a schema that says, a dog is an animal with four legs and fair. When a child encounters a new animal, the child uses existing knowledge to understand it. This brings us to assimilation. Assimilation occurs when we fit new information into an existing schema. On the other hand, accommodation happens when we need to modify an existing schema or create a new one because our previous understanding is no longer enough. For example, a child may think that every animal that swims is a fish. Then the teacher explains that a dolphin swims but breathes through lungs and feeds its young with milk. The child must change their previous understanding and create a more accurate concept of mammals. This process can create what Piaget called disequilibrium, or a state in which our existing understanding does not fully explain something. When we resolve that conflict and develop a better understanding, we reach equilibration. Piaget also proposed four stages of cognitive development. The first is the sensory motor stage. From birth to about 2 years old, children learn primarily through their senses and physical actions. One important development during this stage is object permanence. The second is the pre-operational stage from about 2 to 7 years old. Children develop language and symbolic thinking, but their reasoning is still limited. While egocentrism is also commonly associated with this stage. The third is the concrete operational stage from about 7 to 11 years old. Children begin to think logically, especially about concrete and observable objects and situations. The fourth is the formal operational stage, beginning around 11 years old and continuing into adulthood. Learners become more capable of abstract reasoning, hypothetical thinking, and systematic problem solving. Teachers can apply cognitivism by activating students' prior knowledge. For example, before teaching a lesson about the Industrial Revolution, a history teacher can ask students what they already know about factories, machines, or technological change. The teacher then connects this previous knowledge to the new lesson. Another application is using graphic organizers. For example, a teacher can use a timeline or concept map to organize events and show relationships between ideas. This helps students process, connect, and remember information more effectively. Cognitivism reminds teachers that learning is not simply about changing behavior. Teachers also need to consider what is happening inside the student's mind. The third theory is constructivism, particularly the social constructivist perspective associated with Lev Vygotsky, who lived from 1896 to 1934. Vygotsky emphasized that learning and cognitive development are strongly influenced by social interaction, language, culture, and collaboration. According to this perspective, students do not simply receive knowledge from teachers. Instead, they actively construct meaning through experiences and interactions with other people. One of Vygotsky's most important concepts is the zone of proximal development, or the ZPD. The ZPD refers to the difference between what a learner can accomplish independently and what the learner can accomplish with guidance from someone who is more knowledgeable or skilled. For example, a student may not yet be able to write a complete, persuasive paragraph independently. However, with the help of a teacher, examples, questions, and sentence starters, the student may be able to complete it. The area where the student can succeed with support is the zone of proximal development. Another important concept is the more knowledgeable other, or MKO. The MKO is someone who has more knowledge or skill in a particular area. This could be a teacher, a classmate, a parent, or another person who can provide appropriate guidance. This leads to another important concept called scaffolding. Scaffolding means providing temporary support to help students accomplish a task. As students become more capable, the teacher gradually removes the support. For example, when teaching persuasive writing, a teacher might initially provide sentence starters such as, "The evidence demonstrates that." Later, the teacher may provide only an outline. Eventually, students are expected to write their arguments independently. The support is gradually reduced as students develop mastery. One classroom application is peer collaboration. For example, during a computer activity, a more advanced student can work with a beginner. Instead of simply giving the answer, the advanced student can ask questions and provide guidance. Another application is inquiry-based and real-world problem solving. For example, in a civics class, students might investigate traffic congestion in their community. They can work in groups, gather information, discuss possible causes, and develop a policy proposal. The teacher does not simply provide all the answers. Instead, the teacher acts as a facilitator who guides students as they investigate the problem. Constructivism therefore emphasizes active learning, collaboration, inquiry, and meaningful experiences. Now, let us compare the three theories. Behaviorism focuses on observable behavior, reinforcement, consequences, and practice. In this theory, the teacher provides structure, feedback, and reinforcement, while students practice skills and respond to feedback. For example, students may complete drill and practice activities in mathematics. Cognitivism focuses on mental processes, memory, information processing, and problem solving. Here, the teacher organizes information and guides students' thinking. Students process, connect, and organize information. For example, students may create a concept map to understand a lesson. Finally, constructivism focuses on active knowledge, construction through experience, interactions, and collaboration. The teacher becomes more of a facilitator who provides guidance and learning opportunities, while students investigate, collaborate, and apply their knowledge. To conclude, learning theories provide teachers with different ways of understanding how students learn. B.F. Skinner's behaviorism teaches us that consequences, reinforcement, practice, and feedback can influence behavior and skill development. While Jean Piaget's cognitivism reminds us that learning involves internal mental processes. Students actively organize information, connect it to prior knowledge, and adjust their understanding. And Lev Vygotsky's constructivism emphasizes that learning is also social. Students can develop their knowledge through interaction, collaboration, language, guidance, and meaningful experiences. As future teachers, understanding these theories can help us become more effective educators. We should not assume that every student learns in exactly the same way. Instead, we can use different approaches depending on the learning objective, the needs of our students, and the classroom situation. The most important lesson is that learning theories are not only concepts found in textbooks. They are practical tools that teachers can use to design better learning experiences. When we understand how students learn, we become better prepared to teach them. And that concludes my presentation about learning theories in practice. Thank you for listening, and I hope this presentation helped you better understand how behaviorism, cognitivism, and constructivism can be applied in the classroom. Have a great day.